The contract resting on my desk could pull Sullivan and Associates from the edge of bankruptcy. 60 pages of dense legal language that could save the consulting firm my family had built, all because of one thing, my signature. And I, the CEO of Avalon Technologies, the client they desperately needed, held the power. They had no idea I owned it. Outside my office window, Seattle's autumn rain splattered against the glass, creating intricate patterns that I couldn't quite tear my eyes away from. Diana's voice interrupted my thoughts through the intercom. "Your father and brother are in the lobby. They're early for the meeting." Of course they were. James Sr. and Jr. always managed to show up on time when their backs were against the wall. "Let them wait," I replied, a sharp edge to my voice. I couldn't help but remember all the times they'd kept me waiting, when they'd dismissed my ideas, belittled my ambitions, and made it clear I wasn't fit for the family business. The memory of my last day at Sullivan and Associates played like a looped film in my mind, a painful reminder of how they'd forced me out. "Have fun with your little startup," my brother had mocked as I walked out the door. His laughter echoed through the sleek marble lobby. "Maybe when you fail, you can come back as a junior associate." Dad hadn't even bothered to look up from his phone. "She'll learn the hard way that business isn't about innovation and disruption. It's about tradition, connections, and doing things the way they've always been done." And just like that, I was out. No severance, no support, not even a reference. They had made it clear that once I left the family business, there was no coming back. That was 3 years ago. The thought of their faces when they realized the mistake they'd made. Diana's voice broke through my thoughts, a tinge of curiosity in her tone. "Not yet," I said, cutting her off. "Let's go over the numbers first." She entered carrying a thick folder, her footsteps purposeful. Diana had been a junior secretary at Sullivan and Associates, always overlooked, always undervalued. Now, she was my chief of operations, a reminder that the company had failed to recognize talent, just like they had with me. "Sullivan and Associates has lost 60% of their major clients in the last 2 years, she said, spreading documents across my desk. "Their old consulting model can't keep up with the digital shift. They've had 3 rounds of layoffs, and there's talk that they won't make payroll next month." I nodded, unfazed. Their efforts to adapt had been laughable. They'd hired some overpriced consultants to implement digital solutions, but all they did was slap an electronic letterhead on the same outdated approach. Diana's smile was razor-sharp. "They need this contract with Avalon to survive." I glanced down at the contract, a bitter taste in my mouth. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. When I first proposed digital consulting solutions at Sullivan and Associates, my father had called it millennial nonsense. My brother had laughed outright during my presentation. "Real consulting is about personal relationships," he'd said with a sneer. "It's face-to-face meetings, golf games, and expensive dinners. Clients don't want apps and algorithms." So, I'd left. Took my millennial nonsense with me and built Vertex Solutions from the ground up, working out of a cramped apartment, living on instant noodles and coffee, teaching myself to code between consulting gigs. And all the while, I knew something they didn't: the future of consulting wasn't in stuffy offices or lavish dinners. It was in data analytics, AI, and digital transformation. It didn't take long before the breakthrough came. Tech companies, frustrated by the limitations of traditional consulting, flocked to our innovative approach. In less than 2 years, Vertex Solutions had surpassed Sullivan and Associates in revenue. I kept my success quiet, using my middle name on company documents. Alexander Grace was becoming a name to remember in digital consulting, while Alex Sullivan remained the family's failure. When Avalon Technologies, one of the fastest-growing firms in Seattle, came up for sale, I bought it under a holding company, keeping the ownership hidden. Sullivan and Associates had no idea their former junior partner now controlled the very company they needed to stay afloat. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. "Meeting still on for 10. Dad's nervous about closing this deal." I smiled, thinking back to the smug look on his face when he told me I'd never succeed without the family name. "Diana," I called, "bring me the latest performance reports for Sullivan and Associates. The real ones." not the polished ones they show their clients. She returned with more documents, each one revealing the depth of Sullivan and Associates' collapse, failed projects, lost clients, mounting debts, all carefully hidden beneath expensive suits and an office space they could no longer afford. Diana's amusement was clear. Their pitch meeting should be entertaining. They still think they're here to convince Avalon's board to sign on with them, I mused. Instead, they're meeting me. I stood up, straightening my blazer. How long should we let them perform before dropping the bomb? Let them go through the whole act, Diana suggested. Your brother's probably got one of those famous PowerPoint presentations ready. I chuckled, recalling James Jr.'s obsession with transitions and clip art. Some things never changed. Another text from my brother buzzed on my phone. Brought the whole executive team. Really need this to work. I didn't doubt it. Sullivan and Associates had staked everything on landing this contract, their reputation, their future, their survival, hinging on my signature, the same signature they'd ridiculed me for not having authority to use just 3 years ago. 10 minutes until the meeting, Diana reminded me. Should I send someone to escort them up? I glanced out the window, watching the rain slant across the city, considering karma and the perfect timing for revelation. No, I said, after a pause, I'll go down myself. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize who they're actually meeting with. I gathered the contracts and performance reports, slipping them into a sleek portfolio, one I hadn't used in 3 years, not since I'd walked out of Sullivan and Associates. Now, it was their fate I held in my hands, not my own dreams. Have the boardroom ready, I instructed Diana. Let's give them the full Avalon Technologies experience before we show them who really runs things. Sometimes, success isn't just about proving them wrong, it's about watching them realize just how wrong they were, and I was about to give them a front-row seat to that reality. Sullivan and Associates' team stood in Avalon's lobby like a pack of peacocks among pigeons. Their tailored suits and stiff, practiced postures screamed old-school consulting. My father was checking his Rolex, a nervous habit he'd kept for as long as I could remember. My brother was under his breath, rehearsing his pitch, clutching his presentation folder like a lifeline. I watched them for a moment through the security feed, savoring what was about to unfold. Ready? Diana asked, barely hiding her excitement. Almost. I straightened my blazer, thinking about the day they'd laughed me out of their office. Let's make them wait 5 more minutes. Finally, I stepped out of the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble floor. My father spotted me first, his face flicking from confusion to shock to something like fear. Alex, my brother's voice cracked. What are you doing here? Good morning, gentlemen, I said, keeping my tone even and professional. I believe you have a presentation for Avalon Technologies. We have a meeting with the board, my father stammered, his face drained of color. With Alexandra Grace? Yes, I smiled, savoring the moment. You do? The silence that followed was golden. You're my brother began, his voice faltering. Alexandra Grace, CEO of Avalon Technologies and founder of Vertex Solutions. I motioned toward the elevator. Shall we head up to the boardroom? I'm eager to hear your pitch. They followed me, stunned into silence, their executive team exchanging bewildered looks. In the elevator, my father kept opening and closing his mouth, clearly struggling to process what was happening. The boardroom at Avalon was everything Sullivan and Associates was not: modern, sleek, digital, no mahogany paneling, no oil paintings, just clean lines and cutting-edge technology. Please, I said, gesturing to the chairs, begin whenever you're ready. My brother fumbled with his laptop, nearly dropping it as he tried to connect to our presentation system. The PowerPoint title slide flashed up, Sullivan and Associates, Tradition Meets Innovation. I had to stifle a laugh. As you can see, he started, his usual confidence wavering, Sullivan and Associates brings over 50 years of consulting excellence. Let's skip the history lesson, I interrupted. Show me your digital transformation strategy. How do you plan to integrate with Avalon's AI-driven systems? Well, he clicked through his slides frantically. We have a very robust digital approach. Really? I pulled up Sullivan's most recent project metrics on the room's secondary screens, because these numbers suggest otherwise. 70% of your clients report dissatisfaction with your digital solutions. Your last 3 technology integration projects failed completely. My father stood up, his face flushed with disbelief. See here. No, I cut him off, sliding their real financial reports across the table. You need to see this. I tapped the papers for emphasis. Sullivan and Associates has 3 months before bankruptcy. You've lost most of your major clients to firms that understand modern consulting. The only thing keeping you afloat is your reputation, and even that's evaporating quickly. The room fell into silence, the only sound the hum of the screens illuminating the space. How did you get those numbers? My brother's voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. I'm very good at what I do, I said coolly. That's why Avalon Technologies is worth billions, while Sullivan and Associates is on the brink of collapse. We're not dying, Dad protested, but his voice was hollow, the denial too weak to be convincing. Really? I pressed a button, and more data appeared on the screens. Shall we discuss the layoffs you're planning, the office lease you can't afford, the clients already talking to Vertex Solutions about switching? My brother's complexion shifted, going from red to ghostly white. Vertex Solutions, that's also me. Yes, I said, watching their expressions shift from disbelief to realization. Turns out my little startup is now the fastest growing consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest. Just then, Diana entered with another stack of documents. The latest client acquisition reports, Miss Grace. Thank you, Diana, or should I say, Chief Operations Officer Diana. I smiled at the look of shock spreading across their faces. Remember her, the junior secretary you never promoted? My father sank back into his chair, the weight of it all settling on him. Why didn't you tell us? He asked, the hurt evident in his voice. Would you have listened? I leaned forward. You didn't listen when I warned you about digital transformation. You didn't listen when I proposed modernizing Sullivan and Associates. You literally laughed me out of the building. We were wrong, my brother said quietly, his voice small. Yes, you were, I replied, my tone sharp, about everything. I opened the contract they so desperately needed. Now, let's discuss your future. You're going to sign? Dad asked, hope creeping into his voice. No, I paused, letting the word hang in the air, but I'm going to make you an offer. I slid new documents toward them. Vertex Solutions will acquire Sullivan and Associates. We'll absorb your remaining clients, retain some of your staff, and overhaul your entire operation. Acquire? My brother's voice rose, disbelief turning into panic. You mean takeover? I mean save you from bankruptcy, though. Yes. That means I'll be your boss, I said, the words feeling like a well-placed jab. My father flipped through the papers, his hands trembling slightly as the reality of the situation set in. These terms are generous, considering your situation, I said, standing up. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. And if we refuse? My brother's challenge was all he had left. Then I'll watch Sullivan and Associates crumble, and I'll pick up your clients one by one. I shrugged. Indifferent, your choice. The next day, they signed the papers. What choice did they have? Their empire was on the verge of collapse, and I was the one holding their only lifeline. The transformation of Sullivan and Associates was as brutal as it was beautiful. We stripped away the expensive pretense, the outdated methods, the stubborn resistance to change. Some employees couldn't adapt and left. Others, finally free to innovate, flourished. To my surprise, my brother turned out to have a knack for digital project management once he stopped fighting it. I should have listened to you 3 years ago, he admitted one late night as we worked on the integration plans. Dad took longer to come around, but eventually even he had to admit that my millennial nonsense saved his legacy. Last week, during a client presentation, I watched my brother confidently demonstrate our AI-driven consulting platform, the same technology he'd once mocked as a passing trend. He caught my eye and smiled. A real smile this time, without the usual smugness. Remember when we thought we knew everything about consulting? He asked later. Remember when you laughed at my startup? I teased, watching the embarrassment flicker across his face. We were idiots. Yes, you were, I smiled, but you learned, that's what matters. Yesterday, a business magazine wanted to interview me about the merger. They asked why I chose to save Sullivan and Associates instead of letting it fail. I showed them a photo from my last day at the firm, the one where I stood in the lobby with nothing but my laptop and my dreams. Sometimes, success isn't about destroying the old guard, I told them, it's about teaching them a new way to march. Sullivan and Associates still exists, but now as a division of Vertex Solutions. Their old offices have been transformed into a modern tech hub. Even my father's Rolex, the one he nervously checked that day, has been replaced by a smartwatch. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't watching them fail, it's making them succeed on your terms. And sometimes, just sometimes, family businesses need to be broken before they can be rebuilt.